Coming up today, did you see? Let me go ahead and share this here. Get up there.
By the way, while you're doing that, I was going to say happy birthday to ChatGPT. I just saw a few minutes ago that yesterday was the 1-year birthday of ChatGPT. So it's been around for exactly one year. It doesn't seem like it's been around for like 5 years.
I know. We talk about it like, it's consumed our lives practically for the last, year. So I guess it feels more like 10 years. Anyway, so no, that's interesting, Andy. Thanks for sharing that. Did you see this, Andy? This week, Amazon became the #1 delivery business in the United States, delivering more than 4.8 billion packages so far this year. They're going to cross 5 billion easily. They're now bigger than FedEx, bigger than UPS. It's amazing, Andy, right? What's your reaction?
Well, I remember when we didn't even see these trucks in our neighborhoods, and now they're pervasive. I mean, It really is. It's testimony to the fact that Amazon doesn't do things small. When they say they're going to do it, they usually do it. And most importantly, competitors better take them seriously. We were talking beforehand, and we found this quote from Fred Smith from 2016.
Fred Smith is the CEO of FedEx, right?
That's right. Yep. Fred Smith, the CEO of FedEx, said when asked whether Amazon was a serious competitor in the delivery business, he said he called that idea fantastical. And saying that concerns about industry disruption are overblown. He said, and I quote, "In all likelihood, the primary deliverers of e-commerce shipments for the foreseeable future will be UPS, the U.S. Postal Service, and FedEx."
Wow.
So this was 2016, 7 years ago. The CEO of FedEx couldn't imagine that Amazon would ever be a player. Now they're #1.
It's amazing, Andy. It's incredible. And Amazon, they just continue to innovate across all kinds of businesses, including in fulfillment, right? We had a session on that earlier with
football. More importantly, football.
What do you mean football? What are you talking about?
I didn't know this. I couldn't believe it. But it turns out in 1961, the NFL passed a law saying that the NFL cannot play football games on Friday before 6 p.m. or Saturday in the fall at all. And so that's why you never see any games on Friday, except last week. Amazon did the first Black Friday football game because the game ended before 6 p.m. They designed this to protect high school football games on Friday night, and NCAA games on Saturday. Now, there are NFL games on Saturday in the playoffs in January, but not in the fall. But I thought that was a joke when I first heard that. I'm like, no, that's the absolute truth.
Wow.
So Amazon gave the NFL $100 million and said, we want to do a Black Friday game. We'll finish before 6 p.m. And they did it.
Wow. Amazon continues to innovate. Do you see this, Andy? Home Depot agrees to acquire International Designs Group. What's interesting to this, this is another story from Broken Distribution Strategy. They view this acquisition as their next step to grow its online and offline B2B channel. You know what this is to me, Andy, is a story of, so this International Designs Group they're basically a group of design centers that professionals, contractors go into to solution, for their projects, and they're all over the country. And to me, this is a step. Home Depot Pro is really a distributor, right? In a lot of ways, they're B2B. They're serving contractors. It's just another way they can solution rather than just be a product, transactional, distribution at point of distribution. They're now solving things. With this acquisition, they're solving more problems and being a solution partner to their customer, to their contractor. Thought this was a really interesting move by Home Depot. Any reaction?
Well, what do we always say? I mean, we said a couple of weeks ago, and we'll probably say it from now until the end of time, that I believe, for example, that with some exception, most everything in B2B is a service, not a product. And so if you think about it as a product, a widget you sell, that's one world. But if you think about it as a service and the product is a part of a service, which would be a subscription or relationship, it changes your mentality. Right. I think every B2B company should think about themselves as a service business, and the products are just a means to the end of delivering a service. It's higher margin for a service. Right. It leverages the domain expertise. And as you pointed out here, Home Depot is getting on board with the idea.
Yeah, it keeps people loyal. So no, fascinating stuff. Okay, we got to get to our topic today. This is a hot one, really interesting, Andy. Lots of buzz around this when we posted it on LinkedIn. Here's the topic. Do the Cyber 5, which is basically the weekend bookended more or less by Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Do they matter in B2B e-commerce? You know, Andy, I spent 17 years as a retail e-commerce guy, and it's mattered a lot, you know, in B2C, in consumer retail, and we can see it, you know, in the numbers. We just went through a record-setting Cyber 5 in B2C e-commerce. In fact, total sales $38 billion, almost 8% increase year over year versus 2022. Where is this recession everyone's talking about? Consumers are still spending like crazy. I don't know. Maybe we're all on, you know, in some kind of bubble or something. But you know, Cyber Monday was the biggest online shopping day ever in the United States this year. Shoppers spent 17 or $15.7 million every single minute on Cyber Monday. I mean, it's just these numbers are mind-boggling. You know, the question we have though is, does this impact B2B? And Eddie, I don't know if you've been watching these B2B sites. Look at so those of you on the podcast, we're showing a homepage of Global Industrial Cyber Monday sale. Shop, click, and save 20% off, extended to Friday. This is straight out of the B2C playbook. Global Industrial is a B2B distributor. Crazy. Yeah. Same thing. I don't know, Andy, did you look at like bulbs? We talked to Double G Walker, Greg, this week about what they're doing with Cyber Week. Bulbs Workshop, you know, free shipping on orders over 99. Finish your project and get a free gift this holiday. I mean, this is B2B. Bulbs.com, folks, is a B2B business. This is not B2C. These are B2B companies, Andy, doing things in you know, in just like a B2C retailer does during this season. Thoughts?
Well, we're going to see why in a moment. But yeah, there tends to be some patterns that have emerged here. And we put this out to our panel, which we're going to share in a moment. We have a standing panel of a couple of hundred B2B e-commerce executives. And we said, hey, tell us what you guys did in the last 5 days. And we heard back from, actually, we did very quickly, heard back from about almost a dozen people.
Yes.
And we consolidated some of their thinking into a couple of slides. But I think first you want to show.
Yeah.
We actually put it on LinkedIn as well for an even broader audience. And what did we see?
Well, so what's interesting, we asked the question on LinkedIn, do Cyber Monday and Black Friday, the Cyber 5, have a material impact on B2B e-commerce sales, or is it just about B2C? What's interesting, and these are all B2B folks in our community, folks. So the answer that, and we had quite a few votes on this, the answer 63% said yes, the Cyber 5 grows B2B e-commerce. 37% said no, it's just consumer. Then we said, okay, that made us really interested, you know. So we dug deeper, as Andy mentioned, and we actually went and did this kind of informal, you know, to our sort of standing committee of folks who we go to. You know, these are leaders at manufacturers and distributors, and some of them extraordinarily large, and a lot of them got back to us. Andy, what did they tell us?
Well, let's see here. So it's funny. We had 10 people got back to us, and this is 24 hours. So we may do this in a more formal fashion going forward, but 4 said yes, there was an impact of the Cyber 5 on their business. 6 said no.
Right.
What's interesting is almost nobody said Black Friday affected them. And in fact, a lot of them said, we'll say in a moment, that Black Friday is not really kind of a no-go zone for B2B because people aren't actually working that day. Makes sense. They're at home buying stuff for themselves,
right,
as B2Cers. But what we found was a couple of interesting points here that the 4 that said it did impact, they had something in common. They were pure play companies that were digitally mature, and they tend to be mid-sized companies. When you get into the omni-channel, less digitally mature, generally speaking, but not always, and larger companies, the equation changes, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But for the 4 that said it did impact their business, again, mostly pure plays, there was a pronounced impact. One company told us that they had 2x a higher conversion rate versus a typical Monday. Another company said just by being in the game, 30% higher sales versus a typical Monday. Again, these are pure plays, which I think tend to act a little bit more like B2C companies and maybe look the world a bit differently. Some identified crossover prosumer items. Steve Baruch was telling us about this from his days at MSC. Occasionally you get some tools, etc. But what's interesting is they said they can't really compete with B2C on that front, which we'll talk about in a moment. You saw this with the bulbs.com example. Some companies are stimulating use it or lose it end of the year funds. Like Double G Walker told us that, hey, we're just telling people, do you want to finish the project by the end of the year? Here's an opportunity to finish that project, buy these bulbs, etc., to make that happen. But the most fascinating thing was among the people who said yes here, almost all of them said it was not due to discounting.
Interesting.
They
Yeah.
saw these higher conversion rates, higher sales rates just by having a presence. I think one of the larger companies told us that they didn't see any bump in sales, but they did see more traffic.
Yes.
Meaning that there are more people out there looking probably for B2C stuff, but while they're out there, they don't, take the B2C hat and put the B2B hat on. They're the same person. So you can actually take advantage of more traffic, maybe get higher conversion rate, maybe get higher sales rates by just being in market during those 5 days.
Yeah, that was one of the largest industrial distributors in the market telling us that. And I think, yeah, it's almost like, Andy, it's almost like a post cyber halo. It's almost like some of these things, just when people return to work on Monday, Tuesday, they're kind of seeing a sort of not necessarily an aftershock in some ways, or kind of fallout, or whatever you want to call it, right? It's this kind of, we've gone through this consumer frenzy. Now, what do we expect to see for business?
Well,
This
it's
is interesting.
organic traffic. And to that point, this was shared with us by
Raul over at Aventus Systems. Thank you, Raul.
Right, exactly. And he said, look, this is our B2B versus B2C pattern. So B2B is blue, B2C is purple. And he said we saw a bump on Cyber Monday, and we saw a corresponding bump with B2B. So it kind of mirrored what was going on in the consumer space. So
what's interesting about this, and those of you on the podcast, we're looking at a chart from Aventus Systems that shows traffic by day through Cyber 5. And what's interesting about the chart too, it's really kind of a little bit of a lag, right, Andy? You see the peak on the B2B side a day after the peak on the B2C side. This is really fascinating stuff. So thank you for sharing this, Raul. We also had, other reactions, and those who said no, there was no impact, and they gave us some interesting data. Andy, what'd you see here?
Yeah, these tended to be larger, more traditional omni-channel distributors. And what we heard from them was that demand is not seasonal.
Right.
You can't stimulate demand to buy something for a business project, especially in a gift-giving season like the holiday season. Most, like we said earlier, most B2B customers are out of office on cyber during the holiday, right? This was a repeated theme that it's just not worth, according to these folks, playing during the Cyber 5 because it's too expensive to compete with B2C on the CPC front, which makes a lot of sense. You're going to buy keywords. Organic traffic's one thing, but buying keywords, it's a lot more expensive. It peaks over those couple of days.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, and just to finish it out, that there is some impact. It tends to be the case, at least from the B2B folks we talk to, that Black Friday and Cyber Monday tend to focus more on commodity items.
Right.
And B2B companies don't go there. That's not their bread and butter. And so they're not going to get into a discounting game for their proprietary stuff. This is what Steve Baruch shared with us. Stuff that is a differentiator for them, their core capabilities, their core products. They're not commodity items. And so they're not going to be discounted along some seasonal path. And then the last thing is, and this is interesting, we had a couple of people tell us that if you start playing this B2C game, and I wonder what Global Industrial would say to this.
Yeah.
Your contract customers can be alienated by that, thinking that, hey, if you're changing pricing, on a couple of days during the year, am I really getting the lowest price in this negotiated contract I signed at the beginning of the year? Are you going to make adjustments? So it can cause some problems, even if you're trying to do it opportunistically.
Yeah, well, I think, Global Industrial probably is after some of those contract customers or some of their competitors, right? So,
or their contract customers get, matching prices or something,
yeah.
But more traditional distributors who do the majority of their stuff with pre-negotiated contracts do not want to be playing this game.
Yeah, no, that's true. It's interesting, Andy, too. I mean, we made the point about, kind of larger, sort of the pure plays like Global and others. Global's more of a pure play, and bulbs and companies like that. Even Aventus is much more like a pure play. But it was interesting, though, that even some of the mid-market, like I was talking to Steve Francis over at Diversitech, and he said, that yes, they tried some things this year, and they're surprised they saw higher conversion without any discounting. 2 times normal, he said. 2 times their normal conversion rate. So again, I don't think this is necessarily limited to the smaller, or mid-market, pure plays. This Versatech's a big company. They could, this, and they're a traditional distributor. So I think there's something to this if it's played right. I just think it's going to be different than in B2C. So guys, go ahead. And any final thoughts before we get to our announcements?
I totally agree with you. I think it depends on the product, depends on the company, and it depends on who you're competing with. Because if Amazon's doing any of this stuff and you're competing at all with Amazon, you're going to have to play in this game at some point.
Well, and that's the other thing too. You mentioned Amazon Business. I mean, I was getting all kinds of, through my Amazon Business account, all kinds of promotions, right? So Amazon Business is playing here, and they're, as we talked about at the beginning of our Friday 15 today, they're innovating and they look for places and they test all kinds of things. And so they're paying attention. You need to as well. It's just, I do believe, by industry, by company, by category, it's going to be a little bit different than the typical consumer, going forward. So, Andy, this has been a great discussion. We're at Friday 17 now. So just a couple quick announcements for our audience here. First, we have a Mythbusters coming up December 6th. That's next week at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Myth or reality, the C-suite must have digital experience for e-commerce to be successful. This is going to be fun. We've got a industry expert from Commerce Tools. We're going to put on the hot seat here and see what the answer to this is. We're getting a lot of play on this question, and we're seeing a lot of people move into the C-suite that have digital experience, Grainger, MSC, et cetera, lots of others. So this is one that, that I think we're going to get a nice group for. And join us, and you can also vote on whether the person Tom actually busted the myth or not. And for those of you listening to the podcast, you can also see a replay after we do this if it's after December 6th. So just go to our website for that. And then finally, want to just announce our Master B2B Forum. What a wonderful group of people we have here, about 350 now and growing practitioners. There's no solution providers in here. This is only practitioners at manufacturers, distributors, and brands. It's free to participate. Go to our website, masterb2b.com, click on forum and submit an application to join, to register and join the forum. We encourage you to come in there and network, ask questions, et cetera. You can ask any question there you want, because it is is a trusted place. So you're going to get feedback just from your peers there. So encourage you to join.
Quick point, Brian. This is where for this particular Friday 15, we drew from this community quickly to get some, flash reactions to the Cyber 5 thing. Right. So, this is what we're able to do because of these fine folks.
Yeah, and there's some examples there on the screen for those of you watching of folks that are part of it. So, folks, we're at Friday 18, so we got to get going back to the land of work. So, and stop buying for your Cyber Friday or Black Monday or whatever the heck it is. Thank you all for joining us today. We will see you next week on our next Friday 15.